Hi, everyone, and welcome to Take Charge of Your Wholesale Strategy and Win in Any Market. This automotive news webinar is brought to you by Manheim. We're delighted you're with us for this presentation. I'm Emma Hancock, host, strategist, and moderator at Automotive News. Before I introduce our speakers today, a navigation tip. We encourage you to ask questions at any time. Just type them into the Q&A box on the left side of the webinar window and then hit send. I will steer your questions to our speakers toward the end of the session. Also, to download event content, first click the Event Resources tab and then click the title of the document you want to download. Today's speakers are Ben Caffey, Associate Vice President of Manheim Digital Services, a Cox Automotive brand, specifically aiming to grow the concierge and trade desk teams. Also joining us is Allison Spangler, who currently serves as Senior Business Development Director at Viato. In this role, Allison is focused on helping clients buy and sell inventory outside of traditional auction lanes and finding new ways to turn wholesale into profit. And now we'll turn it over to Ben and Allison to get us started.
Thank you, Emma. We're really excited to be here.
We are. One thing that Emma didn't share is that Allison and I have been working together for, almost 5-6 years now?
Yeah.
And we worked together to help build the Manheim Express field team. And so we've got a lot of great experiences and some bumps and scars to prove what we've been through. And that's actually a great place to start. As we look at the opportunity to be successful in wholesale, it reminds me of an experience that I had a couple of years ago with my son. We were on a family vacation and we had the opportunity to be in Alaska. And in Alaska, down on the Kenai Peninsula, there is a town called Homer. And Homer is the halibut fishing capital of the world. And when you get to Homer, there's a place called the Spit. And it's just a sort of a jetty that goes out into the water, into this bay. And the water there is generally somewhat peaceful. It doesn't look too bad. It doesn't look too choppy. Brock and I decided we wanted to take advantage of that. And so we went on an early morning fishing charter. And so we looked out and we were so excited. Everything looked great. When we got on the boat, we went through, what you normally go through, the safety tips. And we were just excited to get out and go fishing. About 10 minutes into the trip, we realized that bay that looked like it was pretty smooth was actually pretty darn choppy. And all of a sudden, you start to feel a little dizzy, maybe a little nauseous. Some of the other folks on the boat were having a really, really hard time. And it was at that time that the guides came in, noticed what was going on, noticed us out-of-towners that weren't used to that water and said, relax, calm down. And the guidance that they gave us was, look out. You got to keep your head up. You got to look out to the horizon. They provided the guidance to help us get through that choppy water and find where the fish were. And then when we were safe, they were able to help us know where to cast the rods, where to catch the fish. And we had an amazing day. But it really was because those guides were there to help us through what was actually quite a really challenging and choppy experience. And I bring that up because what we see today, and you can see in this chart, that volatility is at an all-time high, right? Like we endured almost decades of relative stability. There's seasonality in the wholesale used car vehicle value market. But the truth is that in the last few years, we have seen an exponential rise in volatility. It's really hard today to know when you acquire a car if it's going to be worth more or less in the next week, let alone the next few months. And it has created I think, that same fear, that dizziness, sickness even for a lot of dealers. They're not sure, how do I proceed in this market? And what I'm here to tell you, what Allison is here to tell you, is that there are ways to use the technology tools and the guides that are out there to help you keep your head up, to keep your eye on the horizon, and to find the fish, to be successful. And so that's really what we want to share with you today.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. So as we mentioned, the market is constantly changing. And as Ben just shared, if you buy a car today, I'm not really sure what's going to happen to the value of that car here in the future. So what do those trends really mean for you, right? When I talk to dealers, specifically independent dealers, as well as franchise, they're sharing with us that sourcing cars remains to be a top challenge for them, right? Auction cars, the inflation that we've seen over the past couple of years, they share with us that prices continue to rise and they're continuing to try to find new channels to purchase the right cars for their dealership and for their customers. And what we've seen over the past couple of years is through COVID and beyond, the wholesale centers have been a profit center for dealers. Historically, before that, it's been okay to be a loss center, right? You've been focused on making money through retail. Wholesale has been okay to be loss. Through COVID, those wholesale centers have turned more into profit centers because of the inflationary period that we've seen. Continued through today, sellers are still less willing to lose money, as any of us would be. Our buyers are also more disciplined. There's more data out there than ever before, and buyers are utilizing that data to make sure that they're purchasing the right inventory for their location. And as the markets continue to change, the markets are only going to continue to change as we go into 2024 as well. There's going to be more effort. And I say more effort really in a positive way as you think about what is your wholesale strategy, and we'll talk more about that as well.
I think if we could just boil this down, we're going to share with you some tools and techniques, processes, and solutions that will help you be successful. But Allison and I together have spent countless hours over the last few years on dealer lots and in the offices of used car managers and GMs, independent dealers and franchise dealers alike. And what we have come to truly believe is that the best dealers have already figured this out, and we want all of you to figure it out. There's a way for everybody to win, that wholesale as a department and as a part of your dealership can be profitable in any market. Like Allison said, there are times where it's not very hard, like during COVID, to be profitable. But the truth is that in this volatile time, it requires discipline. It might require some change in process and some using of new tools and thinking in new ways. But the truth is that we are committed to helping you find profitability in your wholesale department wherever you are.
And that really starts with what's your wholesale strategy. As Ben and I have been talking to dealers over the past couple of years, and even before that as well, dealers always tend to have a very disciplined strategy around retail, right? You know exactly what you're doing. Everyone in the dealership tends to be on the same page, and you're focused on your retail gross. When you ask specifically about wholesale, there's not always that same strategy, and the consistency across dealerships, you really see an inconsistency there, right? Everybody seems to be doing something different. Everyone's going after different ways to make money, which is awesome. But when you think about your overall wholesale strategy, you can add in a few guardrails, a few consistencies, and use some of best-in-class tools out there to make the most money possible, right? Leverage that deep data and insights to help you and your dealership make money. And that really starts at the appraisal. It starts when you decide if you're going to retail a car or when you wholesale a car. One of my favorite things about when I talk to buyers, whether they're independent or franchise buyers, they always say the same thing to me. The money is made at the buy. Well, it's the same thing when you're taking in a car on trade or you're going through an appraisal, right? Recently, dealers that I've been talking to have been specifically speaking about look to book, right? Are we doing enough appraisals in the STAR? Are we putting enough money on those cars? Are we taking those cars in? What we hear consistently is that sometimes we're trying to steal the trade from the consumer. Well, consumers have more data than ever before. So we have to leverage some of the best-in-class appraisal tools, such as Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer, to make sure that we have a consistent process at appraisal, and we're putting enough money on that car to not only to get the trade, but to get the consumer and get that retail deal done as well. So it really starts at the beginning by moving up your wholesale decisioning. You need to be considering your retail and wholesale exit at the point of trade. And as I mentioned, there's different tools out there that you can use to really leverage the right data to make sure that you have a guaranteed profit exit if you decide to wholesale that car. Now, obviously, we're trying to retail every car possible, but sometimes you're a Mercedes dealer and that yellow Cobalt rolls in and you're like, I don't think so. I don't really want to take that car in, but you can make money on that wholesale car. You don't have to pass on that trade any longer. You can leverage best-in-class tools out there to have a guaranteed profit on your wholesale inventory at your time of appraisal. Again, you have to really evaluate each car individually, right? We want you to take in as many cars as possible. When we speak to dealers, they're trying to take in as many cars as possible. They're trying to do as many retail deals as possible, get that consumer in their ecosystem and get that consumer coming back, trading their car back in, buying more from you as well. So you really need to be leveraging the tools out there and evaluating each car on an individual basis, right? It's not as a whole. We all know you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, But at the end of the day, if you have a consistent appraisal process throughout your entire team, you can make money on every car. You can leverage Kelley Blue Book when you're talking to a consumer to make sure that you're getting a car in at the right appraisal and that there's trust and transparency on both sides of that. And then you can also have a guaranteed exit if you decide, or guaranteed profit exit if you decide to wholesale that car as well. Now, some of us have different tolerances from a risk standpoint. As we mentioned, there's lots of different tools that you can use to mitigate that risk, right? As we think about having a consistent appraisal process, leveraging something like Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer at your time of appraisal, or the other tools out there to make sure that you and your team have a consistent way, consistent guardrails to mitigate your risk when you're taking in cars. You can always choose to put a little bit more money on that car if you know that you're going to retail it as well, because you have that front end gross. But at the end of the day, you and your team need to talk about what do you want your consistent appraisal process to be, and how are we going to make sure that we are being as aggressive as possible in all of our appraisals to make sure that we're getting as many deals done as possible to close on the retail side of the house, and then make sure we're profitable if we decide to have a wholesale exit on that car as well.
So now it's my turn. And I love what Allison just shared, because the truth is that part of winning in any market in wholesale, it comes with how you buy. And that's exactly what Allison just shared, is that you've got to be smart about your acquisition. One of the coolest things that I have seen as I've been out in the field, looking at dealers, talking to dealers, those dealers that catch the fire, like Allison said, recognize that even if there's an opportunity to buy a car that they're not going to retail, or that isn't going to tie to a new retail purchase, there's still opportunities to purchase every car. And building your brand as a dealership, as someone who's willing to put money on every car, and not just some money, but strong money, is important. I was at a dealership a couple of weeks ago and looking in their system, in their IMS, and seeing all their appraisals. They thought that they were doing a great job. But for example, there was a car that had $8,000 MMR, and it was not the right vehicle for their inventory. They knew it was going to be a wholesale car, and they tried to rip that car. The offer was $2,500, and they didn't get it. And they were like, well, that's the best we could do. And what we looked at was, hey, within your system, you have the opportunity to get a guaranteed offer on that vehicle. And we pulled up that guaranteed offer on that vehicle, $6,800 as a backstop. And they offered $2,500. So think about how much they're leaving on the table, where that $6,500 is the backstop guarantee for a vehicle that's probably going to bring as much as $8,000 or more. And they weren't willing to pay a real dollar amount that could get that car. And so that ability to acquire cars is a key part of then thinking about your exit strategy. And as Allison talked about, when you think about that decision, retail or wholesale, what I'm going to talk about is all those cars that you've decided to wholesale, whether it's at the time of purchase or you've given it a good run on the retail side and it's time to liquidate and move on to a new and better car to fill your lot to get that car moved. If you acquire it properly, you have a head start when it's time to liquidate. So when it's time to act, what you have is the ability to take that appraisal data that you've used when you acquire cars as your starting point to liquidate. And in some tools, in some IMSs, for example, like vAuto, you have the opportunity to go in and you can take that data that you had at the time of appraisal, you can look at the valuations, and you can start the process of liquidation with a guaranteed number. Talk about mitigating risk. When you know what you purchased the car and you know that you have that plus a guaranteed profit locked in, you are in a great place to start. Not only that, you also then have the opportunity to put it into an active bidding marketplace and drive all of the upside on that vehicle to bring the true market value at any time and keep that market value on the upside while still knowing that if there's a bad day or the market changes, you have protected that car and protected your risk by having that guaranteed out. That's a huge opportunity to have that backstop, that open marketplace. So that solution that I just talked about and that idea is possible partly because we have continued to build out in the industry ways to wholesale from your lot. Now, if you had talked about this 20 years ago, you would have been like, yeah, I can wholesale from my lot. I sell to a wholesaler. Of course, that's an easy thing to do, and it still is. But I think a lot of us recognize that if we want to get top dollar and drive profitability in our wholesale department, we need to bring top money. And top money comes from putting cars in an open marketplace and driving an active bidding environment. in the past, you've had to choose between the convenience of selling quickly from your lot or the opportunity to maximize your retention by taking your car to a physical auction. And taking your car to a physical auction is still a fantastic tool. And we're going to talk about how that's a channel that's successful a lot of times. But there's the opportunity now through technology, which we'll talk about, and service to wholesale right from your lot without having to make the trade-off between convenience and maximizing your retention. You do that by wholesaling from your lot, and there are so many solutions out there that help us do that well. So you think about the ability to have someone come do a CR on your car right there on the lot, images, cosmetic and some mechanical conditions, and then put that car into the marketplace. It's a game changer. And it's enabled because of these new technologies that have been built. 15, 20 years ago, this really wasn't possible. But today, through new technology, even on your iPhone, you have imaging capabilities that are top-notch. And so the ability to take quality images, to train inspectors that can come to a lot and know what to look for, and then leverage new AI technologies. You can see these undercarriage images. You can leverage top class to give that vehicle the very best accurate representation of its condition that allows it to sell online. And we're going to talk about what that means for you as a seller and what that means for you as a buyer. Now, even though you have this great inspection on a car now, you have a CR, and CRs have always been a challenge, but what I've been most impressed with, whether it's on the lot at an auction or on your lot at a dealership, these inspections have continued to improve. The quality, the consistency, and leveraging technology and data to make them even more accurate has been a huge deal. But success comes with how you list. You need to have a listing strategy. Just like Allison talked about having a wholesale strategy, when you list cars, you need to know, how am I going to list these cars to drive the maximum retention? So in the old way, you would just either send a car to the auction or you'd list it online and put your buy now price. Here's the price I need. And usually it'd be like, I know how much I'm into this car for and I need some extra, so here's what the number is. What we have found is we have looked at the very top sellers across the largest marketplaces in the wholesale industry. And what we found as a pattern with those sellers is a few things. One, they recognize that the best way to maximize retention is to encourage bidding. And two, the best way to encourage bidding is to do two things: start the bidding at a low value and sell your cars. Right? Don't hold off, don't no sale, don't set high floors. And so that is really a key here, is that you have the opportunity in specific solutions and on your own to follow pricing strategies of the experts, of the best sellers in the industry, to move cars. When people know that you're willing to sell your cars, then whether you start at 90% of MMR or 70% of MMR or 50% of MMR, you're going to drive the right active bidding environment. People are going to want to come and look at those vehicles. They're going to bid on them, and you're going to see the maximum retention possible because of your listing strategy. One of the great things about the tools that we offer today is that you can have guidance both within your own listings and wholesale, and leveraging some of the tools we talked about earlier, allowing organizations like Upside to set those minimums, provide the guarantee so you have a backstop, and drive as much possible retention by using these core listing strategies. So we talked about, listing and selling from your lot, and we have these dealer consignment apps that allow you to do that. But when you make decisions about how you want to wholesale, and going back to Allison's view of a wholesale strategy, I want you to think about expanding the ways that you can wholesale. What we have found in talking to truly hundreds of dealers is that there are almost none of them that wholesale all of their vehicles in only one way. There are different values and different opportunities across different wholesale marketplace channels. And so as you're looking, look for solutions that allow you to use all those channels while still managing your inventory seamlessly. So whether that's real-time bidding through auctions in a lane, whether that's an open 24/7 digital marketplace, or using these dealer consignment tools right from your lot. If you use tools and solutions that allow you to move cars between these channels to maximize your retention, you're setting yourself up for the most profitability. One of the things that we have seen that allows for that profitability, especially as we move to a more digital world, and we saw this absolutely take off during the pandemic when we were all forced to do more things digitally, is that we've already talked about how the technology has improved to improve the CR, improve the condition reports, the way that cars are represented. But there's still some hesitancy. There was a question in the questions before we started about somebody saying, I feel more confident buying cars in lanes so I can touch and feel them. It makes me feel better about knowing what I'm buying. And that makes a ton of sense. But I know, and I can say this as an entire industry, not just our business, we're committed to making the purchasing experience digitally have as much confidence and have you as a buyer or a seller as much confidence in that marketplace, whether you're selling it digitally or physically. And along with the confidence that comes from transparency and technology, there are also tools that allow that confidence. And so as a seller, if you're trying to maximize your retention and maximize your confidence as a seller, look for tools that do that for you. So look for condition reports that are thorough, that use technology, and that provide guarantees. Look for those guarantees on their inspections. You don't want to receive an arbitration for something that you might not have even known on the vehicle, and that's what the inspector is there for. That provides a confidence to you and a protection to you. Things like seller release that make you know you're not getting that car back for something that was inspected incorrectly. On the buy side, look for things that provide a return guarantee. That's critical. Return guarantees allow buyers to have confidence that if I buy something digitally, I don't 100% know that it's going to be as advertised. So when I get it and I touch and feel it and see that it's not quite what I thought it would be, I want to know that I can get out of that vehicle. And so as we provide assurance tools, it breeds trust and confidence in the marketplace for both the buyers and the sellers. And it allows for the highest retention possible in our marketplace. And that's what we're working for. Now, this is the last thing I want to talk about. This is what we have found over the last 5 or 6 years. Buyers digitally have expanded their geographic reach to buy cars almost double. Partly that's because there's not a lot of inventory, and partly it's because it makes sense. This whole game about buying accurately is important. Allison talked about the need for quality appraisals to get the right cars in when you acquire, and buying cars from consumers and from the street. But most dealers can't source all their cars that way. And so when you need to fill your lot and when you're buying wholesale, you put on that buying hat, expanding your reach, it's still a numbers game. You know that there's a cost of transportation, but with the confidence that comes through all the tools we just talked about, you can go further than you've ever gone before geographically to find the right cars at the right price that fit your needs. And then you're acquiring in the same way profitability at the buy. And so that's the last thing that I've seen is that when you're willing to expand your reach, and you can do that in the way that you save searches within the marketplaces that you like, or just expand the mileage radius. You do that, you're going to find the right cars, and then you can transport them to you. And even though the transport costs a little more, you're set up for success because you know you've got that car in your lot at the right number, and you can either choose to retail it or you can wholesale out of it and make money.
Thank you, Ben. So I know we've heard a ton of information today. Something that I've learned from working with car dealers for the past 10 years is a lot of times you like to be challenged. So Ben and I have a challenge for you, and it's really around your wholesale strategy. Think about what you want your wholesale strategy to be. I think it's really obvious. We want to make money, right? But how are we going to make money? So a couple points to really, really think about with you and your team, right? How am I appraising cars? What does my consistency with appraisal look like? Can I move my wholesale decisioning up to at point of appraisal? What does my exit strategy look like? Am I utilizing all of the digital tools out there while my cars are still on my lot to have an exit strategy for that car, a profitable exit strategy at that I can even confirm at time of appraisal, right? Am I using that in tandem with the auction lanes as well? And then also, from a buying perspective, right, we're always looking for inventory that we can make money on, obviously. So how are we sourcing our inventory? What marketplaces are we choosing to not only list our cars, but to buy our cars as well, right? You as a buyer want to make sure that you have as much protection as possible. And with the digital transformation that we've seen over the past couple of years is there's more and more marketplaces are having buyer confidence and assurance tools out there so that, if you purchase a car digitally online that you weren't actually able to physically hear or touch in person, that, if there's any problem with it, you're going to have a seamless arbitration process. So that's really our challenge to you. At this time, I want to say thank you for me and Ben, but we would love to answer any questions that may be out there.
Well, thank you, Allison and Ben. Great information. Before we went live this morning, we were talking about, Manheim in the 2000s and just the evolution that's really taken place in the last, 15 years. It's really, really, really incredible. And it's such an opportunity. We have a bunch of questions here. I'm going to start with this one here from John. And he is asking this question: where can we find the data each week to track market relativity in forecast? It's appreciating or depreciation direction. I'll just say that again. So I think he wants to know, where he can find that market relativity in the forecast every week.
Yeah, that's a great question. And as we started, the market is consistently changing, even day to day. As you mentioned before we got on, we were talking specifically about Teslas, right? Tesla dropped their prices, so obviously that's going to affect the wholesale market. We want to make sure that our buyers and sellers are as up to date with that information as possible. Cox Automotive has an economist, Jonathan Smoke, on staff, who is the absolute jam. He is consistently putting out data and insights, and that information can be found in our Cox Automotive PR newsroom. That is open to anyone out there, so feel free to go in. I believe Jonathan also does quarterly updates on the market, so I would encourage everyone to check those out as well, as there's always awesome information there.
Okay, great tip, Allison. Okay, another question here. I still prefer to buy cars in lane, which I know both of you covered, so I can really, see, touch, smell the car. How do online wholesale auctions today stack up? So I guess it's really a question of how do you blend the two?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I think I can take that. And we talked a little bit about the improved technology that helps you feel more comfortable understanding the technician of the car, or the condition through technology, not the technician of the car. But I think what's really important to understand is kicking the tires is something that dealers have done for a long time. And when I'm at an auction, I see dealers that all of them kind of are eyeing each other, and all of them are eyeing these cars, and some of them feel like they have the inside track on a vehicle. They know something that somebody doesn't else, and that gives them the upper hand when they're bidding. The truth is that the thoroughness of a condition report, the quality of the images, and the depth of inspection, really the goal is to have as much confidence in the vehicle that you're looking at digitally as if you were kicking the tires in person. And though we might never get to 100% confidence, we can get pretty close. And when you combine that with the guarantees and the assurance products that we talked about earlier, it allows you to expand your reach by purchasing digitally. And it doesn't mean you don't have to buy from an auction. But I think what I've found is that there are still those dealers that want to go physically. But there's a lot of dealers now who recognize the time commitment and have started to buy cars through simulcast. So they're buying cars digitally, but these are cars that are running through lane. And simulcast is really, it's a digital purchase, right? You're not in front of the car kicking it. And so if you're comfortable buying simulcast, you can be sure that you're also going to be comfortable buying cars in an open digital marketplace. And so I think it really is not having to pick one or the other, but knowing that you don't have to choose just physical to have confidence in the vehicle.
Yeah, you can have a mix in your acquisition strategy.
I mean, I think, and also the images that you were showing on one of the slides, like that Jeep, those underneath images, I thought were really, really, high res, just to be able to see in great detail, what that vehicle's been through. I think you'd want that anyways. Even if you were physically there, you'd want to do some studying before you go. So it is a blend. Okay, another question here from Praneeth. What is the best way or method to know the wholesale potential in a particular market? So, I mean, that's a really interesting question.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different ways to look at it, and feel free to jump in as well, Ben, right? Like, you have to look at what you're trying to do with your dealership, right? It goes back to like, what's your retail strategy and how are you trying to acquire cars? As we talked about from sourcing with the auction, like it's all about a mix of your strategy and kind of moving your guardrails, right? I think we have some awesome inventory management tools out there, such as vAuto in particular, that really tells you like what car in your market is doing best and how many of those cars do you need to restock on your lot from a retail perspective. And then you can go out and search for those cars through a multitude of different channels, whether you use Stockwave from a sourcing standpoint or if you're using Manheim as well. I'm sure you've had.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of examples, and I think there are a lot of people who try and find this arbitrage where they can buy a vehicle in one part of the country and sell it in another for value. And I think there's some examples that make that easy to understand, right? A convertible is probably going to do better in Florida than it is in Maine. Subarus seem to always do really well up in the Northwest. If you got a pickup truck, Texas is a good place to sell it. So there's some standard industry knowledge that people have. What digital selling has allowed for is taking away the need to move the vehicle to those places. And so what you can do is recognize the inventory that you have and know where it might sell well and be able to sell it digitally without having to move the asset there until it sells. It's that idea of buyers expanding their reach like we talked about, putting that car into an open marketplace, allowing buyers to find it, even though they might not be one state over or 2 states over or 1,000 miles away. If it's what they want, they'll purchase it. The last thing I'll say about that, which I think is a great question, is I think we've recognized that there's a need to provide this guidance. Similar to that story that I shared at the beginning when we were fishing, there are both tools and individuals across the industry who are committed to helping our clients find success. And so I would say, reach out to your local representative, reach out to those people who are there with that expert knowledge and can provide the insight that you need to help you make the best wholesaling decisions VIN by VIN.
Yeah, that's a great point.
We're really, Go ahead, Allison.
No, I was just going to say, like, not only myself and Ben, but any of the team members out in the field, like that's our goal. We want to see you be successful and specifically make more money. So we're totally here to help.
Yeah. I mean, I was just going to say, just the reach is such a huge opportunity. The reach and then the trust of the tools to be doing your homework, which you really couldn't do your homework 10 years ago the way you can now.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question here from Dirk. So Dirk is asking, what has Manheim done to ensure consistency of condition reports as each CR inspector seems to grade vehicles very differently? I mean, that is the human interaction. Yeah.
Well, I'll take a stab at that. That's something that we live with every day. Part of my role here at Manheim within Cox Automotive is leading our field team of Manheim Express concierge and inspectors across the country. And they're an amazing team. And I can tell you firsthand, the level and depth of training that is provided is top class. But training alone doesn't take away the fact that each individual is a person. And so there's inherent subjectivity in every condition report. And I think to deny that would be lying to everybody. And so we recognize that. So what our goal is to how do we mitigate subjectivity through a few things? 1, through consistent training, 2, through consistent process, and 3, through technology.
Yeah.
And to lean in on that technology piece, what we have done, I can just speak to what we're doing here at Manheim. We're able to leverage data on that specific VIN. So when an inspector is inspecting that VIN, they're not just looking at a car for the first time. They're able to see some of the history that we know as Manheim on that vehicle. Does it have structural in its vehicle history report? That's important to know. Sometimes structural is hard to find, structural damage. And so we're able to identify that through vehicle history. We can look at any arbitrations that have happened in the past, any issues that have gone on in the past, leveraging data to allow us to be better. And then the last thing is using the OBD2 scanners to generate DTC codes. It's a game changer for the industry. It's something that I think a lot of industry team members are going to adopt. But the ability to say, I don't know, I'm not a detailed mechanic, but I can tell you that the car knows what's wrong with it. That's the beautiful thing about technology these days. And so if we can tap into what the car says is wrong and share that, that provides a level of objectivity and consistency that's moving us a long ways towards what we want, which is consistency in every CR. We have made huge steps, both when we're inspecting cars outside the gate and cars that are inside of our Manheim locations, to provide more accurate, higher resolution images, incredible efforts to take the top class, high-end images, like you saw the undercarriage images.
Yeah.
All those things combined provide a transparency and objectivity that help balance the subjectivity of the fact that there's still a human in the loop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. Here is another question. Okay, about wholesale. So always making money at wholesale sounds too good to be true. How is that possible? So, I mean, I think you've covered this throughout your presentation, and Allison, you certainly were talking about, unrealized profit potential.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the dealers have seen it over the past couple of years with COVID, as we kind of started the conversation, is that wholesale has always been kind of thought of as this, like, it should be red, right? Like, we shouldn't be making too much money in wholesale, which I wholeheartedly disagree with. I think when you have an overall wholesale strategy and your team is all on the same page and you can be consistent about how you take the cars in, and then it flows through your retail process, and then you have that exit strategy, that you can consistently make money on wholesale. And if anybody has any additional questions, like, please feel free to reach out to myself or Ben directly. We would love to continue to talk about it. But I refuse to believe that your wholesale should be a loss center. It should be a profit center for your store.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, here's a question from Zach, and I think it's interesting. Has there been any discussion about the buyer having to pay for the PSI if the seller greenlights it and it fails a PSI? So that would give online buyers more faith if the seller is held accountable for greenlighting a car that fails the PSI. If it passes, the buyer should be paying for it. So post-sale inspection.
Yeah, no, that's a really fantastic point. And we work closely with the team here that leads those products and solutions. And so that's something we can take back to them. I think really the idea is, what I'm hearing is buyers want confidence, and they want to know that when they buy a car, getting a PSI provides that confidence before they ship it out of an auction specifically to their location. And so if there is an issue with that car, part of the value to the buyer is the fact that they have saved on shipping and dealing with an arbitration and all the things that come with the pain of taking that car away from an auction and then having to bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's value there, but I understand the fact that as a seller greenlights a car, they're saying that condition is it rides and it drives and it's ready to go. And so I think there's continued room for us to find ways to provide confidence in the marketplace for both sellers and buyers. I would also go back to the idea that there are a lot of assurance products, even when the car is not on the dealer lot, as we talked a lot about selling right from your lot, where PSI might not be an option because the car isn't going to an auction. You still have confidence as a buyer that that car can be returned for any reason, or that you can arbitrate through the NAAA standard arbitration policy with additional protections to make sure that even if you don't get every car right, you get almost every car right. Yeah. And when it's not right, we make it right.
Make it right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really coming down to the right tools and trust. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we're going to do one more question here. So I'm sourcing most of my inventory from consumers, off-street, Facebook, Marketplace, etc. And I'm selective from my dealership. How can I make smarter acquisitions from those channels?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. And it's a question that I talk to our independent dealers a lot about, right? Like, they get scrappy of the ways that they find inventory to source for their dealership. And I think by using that, it really goes back to the tools, right? What data are you looking at? Are you being consistent about the different data streams that you're looking at? I know independent dealers in particular may be looking at, let's say, JD Power from a lending perspective, right? I would encourage everyone to consistently use MMR, right? Pull up the Manheim app, look at that car, and really do your homework on it too, right? Are you pulling AutoCheck? Are you pulling the Carfax on that? Like, how can you make sure that you're making the most informed decision? And I think it goes back to those, some of our sourcing and acquisition tools that we have, such as Manheim.com or Stockwave. Ben, if you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just add that anytime you're buying cars from an individual, there's some emotion involved because it was their car. And so being able to take the emotion out by leveraging the tools that Allison just talked about and providing some level of objectivity. I'm not the one that telling you your car is worth this much. This is this external tool that we both agree we've done the proper inspection or appraisal on the car, and this is what the car's worth. That takes some of that emotion out and allows there to be a better buying. And then just like what we talked about and what Allison shared is when you purchase the car at the right money, you not only help that consumer feel confident, and they might be interested potentially in buying a car from you, but you have locked in profit at the point of purchase, whether you choose to retail or wholesale that car. And I think that's the key.
Well, really, really great advice and insights. And I think we're just about at the end of our webinar, Ben and Allison.
Oh. I was just going to say thank you so much for the time, Emma. It was awesome talking to you. And really, thank you to the dealers who took the time to join. We've said it a couple times. We're passionate about helping you make money in your wholesale strategy. So if there's anything you can do, please reach out to us.
Yeah. Here at Manheim, we say our mission is yours. We are committed to your success. We really are. And so anything that we can do, please don't hesitate to reach out to Allison or I. We're happy to talk more about these issues with you and help you find ways to find success in your business.
Well, that brings us to the end of our webinar. It was a great webinar. Thanks to today's audience for the questions. If you asked a question that we didn't get a chance to answer, our friends at Manheim will follow up by email. If you learned something from this session, please tell your peers about it. The recording will be available in about an hour. You'll find it at autonews.com/webinars. When the webinar ends, a survey will pop up on your screen. We genuinely appreciate your feedback as it helps us create future webinars that are even more beneficial to you. Thanks again to Ben, Allison, and Manheim for bringing us this presentation, and to you for joining us. On behalf of everyone at Automotive News, have a great rest of your day.